In Hinduism, Pitrus not only refers to ancestors but also a group of primordial beings. Not many talk about these mysterious beings when they talk about this concept of Pitrus and ancestor veneration. What is the purpose and symbolism of these beings? We will look at some of the ancient Puranic texts to better understand this concept and see if we can unravel some of the symbolisms and mysteries. The word Pitru translates to father. Typically, it refers to three generations of ancestors of a person: parents, grandparents, and great grandparents. But beyond that, these ancient texts talk about a group of primordial beings who are called the Pitrus. They state that the Pitrus are one class of primordial beings created during the very initial process of manifestations. One of the earliest mentions of these beings, these Pitrus, comes in the Brahmanda Purana, an ancient text. According to the Brahmanda Purana, when the creative aspect of the Supreme Absolute Brahma creates the devas, the celestial beings, they started worshipping themselves. They were caught in ego, an obsession with the self. Brahma chastises them for being deluded in ahamkara, and they seek his pardon. Brahma then asks the devas to go and get knowledge from their children, the Pitrus. The Pitrus were beings who possessed complete control over their jivatmas and were in harmony with the infinite consciousness. They were always in union with the Supreme Absolute. So from them, the devas get enlightened on the true nature of reality. They understand that ahamkara, ego, is what keeps them bound to the material, and the way to transcend the material universe is to understand the true nature of reality. So in this context, the Pitrus were teachers to their fathers, the devas, the celestials. The words like fathers and creations should not be seen from a biological perspective. The Pitrus were one more differentiation of the infinite consciousness. The ancient text, in fact, sheds light on how the Pitrus came to be created. The Brahmanda Purana states, "None of this was in existence then. The universe was in complete darkness. Brahma, who was the sole being in existence, performed a very austere penance difficult for others to perform. Meditating and contemplating, he manifested the worlds by means of that yoga." Yoga again translates to union, a state where one is in union with the Supreme Absolute, the self fully cognizant of the fact that it is one with the Supreme Absolute. Sitting beyond the concept of space and time, the infinite shapes and forms, past and futures of beings and worlds were manifested by the creative potency of the Supreme Absolute. According to the Puranas, the Pitrus, the primordial beings too, were manifested fully endowed with yogic potential. Yogic potential implies the fact that they are always in harmony with the universe and they are always in union with the Supreme Absolute. The Purana states that there are 7 groups of Pitrus. 3 of them are formless, amurtis, and 4 of them are samurtis, embodied ones. The Puranas state that these Pitrus are most excellent. They have sublimated all their desires. They have got rid of greed, delusion, and fear. They are devoid of cares and anxieties. So what is the purpose of this Pitrus? The Purana has this very mysterious verse where we see the concept of Soma again. It states, propitiated in the Shraddha, the Pitrus adopt their yogic prowess and develop and strengthen the Soma, whereby the 3 worlds sustain their lives. Pitrus are the beings that strengthen the Soma. What is the Soma? Soma is also called the nectarine food of the gods, but if we read the ancient Vedantic texts, we also find that the Soma is the subtle body, which is the soul, cloaked in manas, buddhi, ahamkara, and chitta. This is also called the Somo Raja. And if you remember, the Chandogya Upanishad states that the Somo Raja becomes food for the celestials. After death, when these souls reach the Chandraloka, the celestials resonate, enjoying the experience that the subtle bodies gained in their cycle of birth. So, Pitrus are the beings that strengthen the subtle body and are directly responsible for material creation and our state in the material world. But that's not all. The Brahmanda Purana states these Pitrus bestow absolution, liberation, after one abandons the three worlds of normal existence. Now, the Pitrus here are also the guiding force towards liberation for beings that exist in the three worlds, the Bhuloka, the Bhuarloka, and the Swargaloka. How do they do it? And it is here that we look at an interesting narrative from the Uma Samhita of the Siva Purana. This is a story narrated by Markandeya to Bhishma, and you can see the symbolism in the story. It is very essential to understand the symbolism, otherwise, we would just miss the whole point of the story. This is why the story is not very popular nor quoted. There were 7 sons of sage Bharadwaja, and these sons were named Vagdushta, defiled in speech, Krodana, angry, Himshra, violent, Pishuna, backbiter, Kavi, poet, Swashrisha, self-creating, and Pitruvartin, venerating the Pitrus. Now their father passes away, and these 7 sons become disciples of sage Garga. Even though these 7 brothers were endowed with yogic capability, due to their senses drawing them outward, they deviate from the path of dharma. And this again is a symbolism of the self that is deluded by the senses and is caught in the cycle of birth and death. So one day, they roam about in the forest, and in hunger, they even end up killing their teacher's cow. Again, this is a symbolism. The word go in Sanskrit also means knowledge. Pitruvartin, one of the brothers, insisted that whatever action they were going to do, they should do it, dedicating it to the Pitrus. So they end up killing the cow and also lie to their teacher, sage Garga, about what they had done. The actual symbolism of this narration is that the self, ensnared by the material world and deviating from dharma, ends up killing the knowledge of its true nature. So what happens next? Karma takes its course, and these 7 are reincarnated as hunters. But because they propitiated the Pitrus, because they venerated the Pitrus, they retain their memory of previous lives. The story, as you can see now, is a symbolism for the function of Pitrus. This is an interesting aspect of what these primordial energies can do. So in their next life as hunters, they remembered their past, and disillusioned by the cycle of birth and death, they go to the forest and they meditated, focusing on their union with the Supreme Absolute. So they did not want to be part of the material world, because they knew what they had and they knew what they had lost by deviating from dharma and falling prey to the material world. Now again, these 7 die and are reborn in their next birth as 7 aquatic birds. The text calls them the Chakravakas. Again, they remember their past lives. Even as birds, they were very pious. They were always indulging in meditation like sages. They did not have any egoistic feelings. And the text states that they grew old as bachelors, remembering their previous lives. So while they are almost on their way to give up this life as well, one day they see a prosperous king, the king of Nipas, accompanied by his retinue in the forest. This was the king of a very prosperous kingdom, so he had come with all his retinue and his queen and so on. One of these birds, Swatantara, yearned much on seeing the happy king. He started feeling desires, and he declares, if there is any merit to this penance that I have undertaken, let me be like the king, with fortune and happiness. Now 2 of his friends, the 2 birds, pipe up and they say that they would join him and be his ministers. So it is very clear that these 3 beings, these 3 birds, these 3 sons of the sage, have unrealized desires in addition to their karmic burden. So all 7 birds cast off their bodies and again were reborn in the kingdom of Kampilya. By this time, most of their karmic debt was cleared. So 4 of them had memory of their previous birth, but 3 did not have the memory. Swatantra, the bird who wanted to become the king, was reincarnated as the son of the king of Kampilya. Soon, after the passing of his father, he became the king of Kampilya. He was a just ruler and never deviated from the path of dharma. 2 of his brothers became his ministers, the other 4 became teachers and masters of the dharmic texts. Finally, they did spend their time quenching their desires righteously, and when they reached the end of their lives, all of them attained freedom from rebirth. And this was their great goal. Now, you can see the theme of this narrative. According to the dharmic faiths, being pure at departing, being detached from the material, is a key to breaking the cycle of birth and death. So the Pitrus, accordingly, are the primordial energies that guide the self, the Atman, in a righteous direction towards liberation. In this instance, they help them by giving access to their past memories, by helping them subtly realize the reason for their current state, understanding better their samskaras and vasanas, the latent desires that lay within them, and finally, to quench their desires in a righteous way, in accordance with dharma, and move onwards towards liberation. Needless to say, had Brahmadatta been an unjust king squandering this life away in adharma, he would have been reborn again. So the ancient texts tell us that the Pitrus are primordial aspects of the infinite consciousness that can guide us towards liberation and also quench unrealized desires, if any, in a righteous way. So this is how the Pitrus strengthen the Soma and sustain the 3 worlds of experience. When we talk about these beings, it is imperative to understand that the fundamental tenet of dharmic faiths is that all that exists is the supreme absolute infinite consciousness. Even the Puranic theology is monistic in nature. I prefer to call it differentiated monism. It talks about an all-pervading God energy, and this could be called Shivam, Brahman, infinite consciousness, etc. This is initially unmanifest, and from the unmanifest state manifests itself into existence, taking various shapes and forms across various planes. Among these manifestations, some are primordial, created during the beginning of this cycle of manifestations, and obviously each of these manifestations is created with certain qualities. There are celestials like the devas, daityas and dhanavas. There are humans and other sentient beings who are animated by the jivatma. And finally, there is the Godhead, the Ishvara, the ultimate qualified aspect of this infinite God energy. The Pitrus too are a part of the same infinite consciousness. The Pitrus are the regulatory mechanisms for guiding the flow of the self so that it can experience the illusory reality while at the same time move towards liberation and attain the state of Sat Chid Ananda, pure consciousness bliss. Why does this manifestation of this infinite consciousness happen? This is a dance of delight of this infinite consciousness. Like water flowing in every direction, it too flows across infinity, experiencing all aspects of existence regulated by aspects of itself. We will go into more details of this creation in a later episode, and we'll also look at the Pitrus, who are the ancestors, and what the whole concept of ancestor veneration means. As always, the known is a drop and the unknown an ocean. Peace.